Hello, everyone, and welcome to another iWorkinSport live interview. This is number 12, if I'm not wrong, and a special one. This is definitely is going to be a big one. I'll get back to that in a second. Let me just introduce myself. If this is your first time here, my name is João Frigerio. I am the founder of iWorkinSport, and for you who don't know iWorkinSport, basically, we started as an event. Today, what we do is we connect talent with recruiters. We promote education and we support career growth, all in sport. Here you can have a bit more information about us, iWorkinSport.com. And today, as we're saying, this is the 12th episode of our live interviews. It's certainly the most important one that I have done so far, and probably the most relevant that I will do for a long time. It's we've had excellent guests until now, but this topic is really important, and we need to discuss. We're going to talk about the challenges faced by women, by Black women, in working in sport. So, of course, racial discrimination is not an easy topic to address, but I think it's so very important. It is super necessary to do so, especially at this moment with the current, the momentum of the Black Lives Matter movement and the relevance of that topic nowadays. This talk was actually inspired by a two-part series done by the International Center of Sports Studies, CIES, that are academic partners in the past 2 weeks. Actually, you have the description as well, the link in the description below. You can check that hopefully later. And we discussed then, or they discussed then, racial discrimination in sports in America. And I decided to up the ante this time and bring the gender discussion to the mix. The whole panel there was great, but I decided to invite two women that were fantastic there. They're friends, colleagues from the fifth semester. I'm going to bring them to join us. The first one is Eden. The second name is hard. Ghebresellassie. I hope I got that right. Eden, is that okay? How are you?
Hi, good. How are you? You did a good job.
Yeah, thank you. So Eden is a global creative strategy at ESPN. And we also have Neikelle Moore, also known as Nikki. How are you, Nikki? She's the director of sports investments at Emerson Collective. And she's been for a long time at the NBA as well. How are you, Nikki?
Great. Fantastic. Thanks for having me here.
It's so great to have you here. And as I said, as you know, I followed very closely the talks, the two past weeks, the webinars that you participated in. And there's not a question, I think, of being repetitive. I think it's a question of continue the conversation. I think we'll probably, even with this and with others, we won't talk enough about it. And as we discussed, I think one part that is probably missing in the equation of the fight for civil rights movements in America or elsewhere, and the racial thing is the participation of all races, especially white people, who for probably a long time saw that as someone else's fight. And even if we're not ready, or people are not ready to go to the front line and participate in protests, I think it's super important to join the conversation, try to understand better what is going on and support it somehow, right? I think my way to try to support it in a little way is to bring you to, so we can hear more about it, about the difficulties, about the challenges that you both face or have faced in your careers, and see if we can shed light to, who knows, propose some good ideas to tackle all that. Now, I'm going to start with very simply asking you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a bit more about, especially your career in sports. How has that developed? Do you want to start, Eden?
Sure. So I actually started in sports a little later after I graduated from the FIFA Master. And I had different jobs here in America. And then I landed, in my latest job. And I don't know if I should just get into it right away, but basically, when I first started working in corporate America, I did not know specifically, as I do now, the difference between being a Black person in corporate America and not being a Black person. But I always felt like I wanted to fit in. Like, I knew I was different, but I didn't think it was like a systematic issue. So, for example, in the beginning, I would always straighten my hair. I would always kind of like be super careful about, specific things that were more outerly than my actual job and my actual like execution of whatever I needed to do. And that was because obviously wherever I was always like the only one there that looked like me, and at times, sounded like me and acted like me. And so in corporate America, first it starts with you kind of wanting to fit in, especially for me. I just kind of thought automatically, if I fit in, they're going to like me. If they like me, I'm going to be promoted, I'm going to make more money, and I'm just going to grow in the company. And also hoping that it was based on merit. But what I had to learn kind of like starting in the first 2-3 years was that wasn't the case. First, it started with realizing that within 6 months of when I was hired, someone that was hired 6 months after me, but was a white girl, was making a salary of $2,000-3,000 more than me. And only because my boss then was a woman of integrity, she actually went to HR and leveled up my salary with the same one as the white girl. And on my resume, I had way more experience than that person. So I don't know what the justification was behind, but it's something also that I found out kind of later. And so that was the first wake-up call for me. But I always said, you know what, if I do the right thing, the right things are going to happen towards me. And again, like I just kind of kept like, I guess, a layer of hope in everything that I did and the way I behaved. And even though I was questioning things, it was always an internal dialogue and never something that I was like, maybe there is something fundamentally wrong here that I need to actually go ahead and change. So then the first 3-4 years, they were kind of like that, right? Kind of like taking the punches and kind of saying, maybe it's me, maybe I need to do this, maybe I need to do that way. And the best I could do was simply asking for feedback. And the sad thing was that the feedback that I was asking was only with two white people, whether they were women or men, because also there was no woman in leadership, specifically in the marketing group where I worked, that maybe I could go to them and say, hey, how did you manage to become a leader here where white people respect you, where you can manage, white people, and not, be bucketed in the angry Black woman label. And so then, it just kind of became me trying to give myself like justification and assumptions, because there was no place for me to really try to understand, like, why are these things happening, or like, why are these things, going that way, and I'm not maybe being promoted, fast enough, or why am I not given specific opportunities? And so it just became an internalization. And I don't want to take too much time from Nikki's answer, but for me, it just, after the first 4 years, I started realizing that, maybe it wasn't all my fault if things weren't happening my way. And I think we discussed this kind of before. It just became also very heavy Monday through Friday to have to basically like try to fit into this culture that couldn't care less about me. And I give this example all the time. So I was born and raised in Italy, but my parents are from Eritrea in East Africa. That's why I don't look like, I'm not a white Italian. And I try to go visit my parents and my brother who still live in Milan, Italy, at least once or twice a year. So when I would go to those vacations, I came back to corporate America, and I would say I went to Italy. People will be like, oh my God, that's so nice. What did you eat? Tell us everything. But then if I said, also I went to Africa, to a specific country in Africa, because that's my preferred type of vacation, and I would come back, the feedback wasn't the same. I would actually be kind of like, they're like, oh, okay, you went to Africa, and there was no openness to wanting to understand, one, that, there is 54 countries in Italy, in Africa, and therefore, you can call it just an African trip. And then I like to give this example also to, anyways, so basically what I'm saying is, even though I was trying to be open to say, you know what, I am forced to be in your culture and kind of having to understand how you guys think, how you guys function, and learn you guys. I try to be open about also people learning me and my background. And it always felt like there was a wall and no interest in that. So that was very deflating. And, I can continue talking, but I don't want to take too much time, Nikki.
Actually, you went in a way that I was going to ask you next, which was actually to paint a picture of what it's like to be then a Black woman working in sport, or in your case in corporate America. But just before I go to Nikki, and then I'll pass the two questions to her, just briefly give us a bit of your path. How do you actually started working in sports? What did you do? You did, of course, a master's. What did you do before, and how did your career progress until you get to where you are now at ESPN? Did you hear me?
Oh, you're talking. Oh, sorry. I thought the question was for Nikki.
Yeah.
So I was born and raised in Italy, but my parents are from Eritrea and East Africa. So when I graduated from high school, I decided to move to America and pursue my university here. I graduated in international laws with a minor in French. And after that, I moved to New York, and I started working for about a year at Rolling Stone magazine. So my tenure in New York then was, a little bit short, because then I decided to move back to Europe to pursue my master's degree, where I did the FIFA Master in International Laws, Humanities, and Management of Sports. And then after I graduated, I basically moved back to New York, and I worked first at the UNDP, which is the United Nations program department, and then development program department. And then I started working at the New York Cosmos soccer team, when they were trying to enter the MLS. And then I finally worked at Street Soccer USA, and then I landed at ESPN. So that was my trajectory to, the sports world.
Okay, great. What about you, Nikki? So could you give us then a brief sort of description of summary of your career, and then you can already then paint a picture what it's like to be a Black woman working in sport right at the start. And just to say that we're actually having already some comments. Someone here said that is really looking forward to see you talking. I'll post them on the screen later. But keep it, if you're watching, keep sending your comments and questions. We're going to talk about those. Please, Nikki.
Sure. So I guess we can go all the way back to the beginning, but I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, born and raised till I was 10. Moved to the US, had a couple blips in the middle as I like to refer to it as my parents' mascot for their advanced studies, one in Palo Alto and then another in Bloomington, Indiana. And eventually moved to the US permanently, first to the Atlanta area, and then high school in Maryland. Then I went on to college in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. Business background, so did my undergrad at Wharton, and through that you get a Bachelor of Science in Economics. But really and truly, you pay most attention to your concentrations. In my case, global analysis and management. And actually through the management side of that was where I got, my first introduction to sports law and management. But really and truly, I've been a sports junkie forever. Always knew I wanted to work in sports, love languages, like to travel. And I remember when I first arrived on campus at Penn, I actually had already known about the FIFA Master Program. And one of my friends in DC, they were attending Howard. There's a lot of Trinis at Howard. They mentioned that they had heard about this program that was in 3 different countries, focused on the international side of sports, both from the history and internationalization perspective, as well as the business perspective, and then a law and administration perspective. And so I was 17 entering college. I remember I called some of the FIFA Master alumni that were in the US, and I said, okay, what do I need to do? And I remember, I think one of them actually said to me, how about you just focus on graduating first? You're 17, just take it easy. But, I always knew I wanted to work in sports, but I knew I had other interests. So when I left, when I graduated from Penn, my first job was at Citi in their export and agency finance team, so at a bank. And I really liked it because it was internationally focused. I was focused on Latin America and the Caribbean, so South America, Central America, Mexico down, basically. And it was more of the nuance between, okay, how could we finance different projects that were happening, but also having to deal with the political nuances and the people and culture that I loved the most. So I stayed at Citi for 3 years, really enjoyed it, had some great teachers from a technical standpoint that I didn't know how it would come in handy later, but it would. And I did the FIFA Master. And just to give you a little bit of my psyche, I remember I applied to the FIFA Master 2 years out of college. I didn't get in the first time. And I remember my first thought was, oh, surely they didn't read my resume. I don't understand. They must not have read my application correctly. We're going to have to try this again. So the next year, I tried again. I also found out that it's not common for American students to do that. Usually we just move on and go to another program. But anyway, went to the FIFA Master, met an amazing group of 27 other folks plus me, 22 nationalities represented in 28 people, which is exactly the environment I wanted. And frankly, it was 10 months, which felt perfect because you could talk about sports from the beginning of the day to the end of the day in many different contexts with people with very different backgrounds and experiences. Leaving the FIFA Master, I then...
without interrupting, well, already interrupting you, but there as well, you already notice how the sports work, right? Because in your class, you had, yes, what was it, 4 women, is that correct?
Yes, 4 women out of 28 participants. And I remember it well because at the intro ceremony, they do this lovely welcome to everyone. We get dressed in our Sunday best / business style. And at the welcome, the patron at the time actually said, ladies, you notice there's 4 of you. Welcome. This is the sports world. And I just remember, once again, my psyche was, well, you let us in now, so watch out, right? So it was, that experience itself was already just eye-opening. And of course, I was the only Black girl in the program, Black woman in the program. I was 24 at the time, and we had a really nice age range as well. So just very good experiences of people who had been in sport, had not been in sport, wanted to break into sport, and from different professional backgrounds, insurance, journalism, law, marketing, in my case, from finance side. So anyway, so I finished the FIFA Masters program, then I went on to this program. It's an executive training program at MLS, and it was actually... I was I wanted to stay in Europe really badly. And it actually turned out to probably be the smartest thing I could have done. Because at that time, you're now getting into a business that you have maybe some of the technical background on, but you've never had any pressure for it. And the great part is, once they learned about my city background, they said, all right, we're going to throw you into everything, because they were a small team having to get a lot of stuff done. And so I was working with the partnerships team at the time. And they threw me into everything, and I started realizing, well, if any of this goes wrong, technically I'm just a little trainee, so I guess I could, really get into this. There's no real pressure, and my bosses had my back. They were great. So I did the MLS executive training program for a bit, and then I fortunately, through a couple of odd non-interviews, actually, I was told it was not an interview. I was interviewed by the head of the NBA Latin America at the time, but I was told it wasn't an interview. So I probably went as my authentic self, and we just had conversations, what I thought was a conversation, what he may have treated as an interview. And I guess the first lesson is every conversation is an interview.
Take notes. If you're watching, take notes.
Take notes. Every conversation is an interview. So he actually extended, he told me something like, wait a couple weeks, I got to go to All-Star, I'm coming back. And I'm like, well, I'm not going anywhere. So I don't understand what the rush is. But at the time he was building out his Latin America team, and he was just, I guess, looking for, different swaths of talent that he could bring on to help him with that, and extended me an offer to join the Latin America team. And that's where I spent the most of my time at the NBA. And it was great because we were a small team. We had a big region to try and figure out. And that meant you got thrown into everything. You got to see, the first thing he did was drop these huge binders on my desk of the media rights that we had in the region. And he said he wasn't going to give me a job description. He wasn't going to give me a specific title. I just had to learn to do everything, which was great. And from there, it went from, okay, learn all the media discussions we're having. Okay, now we're going to try and figure out how we develop Brazil. All right, I need you to also make sure you're focusing a lot on sponsorship and business development. Oh, and by the way, we have some events that we need to run, and we'll have some deliverables for partners.
How long did you stay there?
6 years. But this was all happening in probably the first 3 years. And then eventually, I ended up getting to see a bunch of projects and things that I would have never even dreamed of, because I didn't know they existed really in the context of sports and the sports industry. For example, I ended up working on an arena consulting deal in Uruguay. And so, these are things that you don't walk in with an outline of what's going to happen. And so after that experience, did Latin America, I was on a placement with our NBA Africa office in Johannesburg, and focused on managing a media partner and learning how to both license and sub-license rights. And that was new for me in that level of detail, as opposed to just knowing what media partners existed and maybe the nuances of their deals. How do we now create them, and how do we help people grow in their partnership with us? So, it was a fantastic opportunity. Came back to the Latin America team. And then somewhere near the end of 2017, I started saying, what else do I have to learn from a subject matter perspective? What am I okay with how much subject matter I have? And that was fine. I said to myself, I think there's something more that I need to understand. What more can I do with sports that isn't just subject matter focused, that isn't just business focused? There's too much going on in the world right now for me to believe that sports, with the level of influence it has, could only be on court, on TV, on an asset. And so that's when, oddly enough, you speak things into reality, and an opportunity came to me with the company Emerson Collective. It's more focused on social change, leveraging different assets to provide equitable opportunity. And they had invested in a sports team. And although I didn't understand how those two things worked on the surface, coming here has helped me to both be exposed to people that come from entirely different backgrounds, as well as taking the sports knowledge and the love that I have for sport to try and understand, especially in this moment now, how the different levels of sport work to affect change. And that's what I've wanted to learn in the chapter, and that's the chapter I'm in now.
Right. And just sort of to complete, well, when Eden was sort of painting that picture of what it's like then to be a Black woman in corporate America, let's say, she mentioned a case as well where she was just being paid less, and thanks to her boss that brought the matter to the HR, got that fixed for her then. For you, Nikki, if you were to quickly, otherwise I'm going to do like Pierre Lanfranchi, like this. How would you then paint that picture? And if you could already maybe give an example of when an episode where you were treated differently.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, the sports world, especially for Black women in sport, can be a bit of a treacherous place, but it's also a place that's full of opportunity. For me, I've been lucky enough, especially through and after my NBA experience, to have a lot of Black women professionals, figuratively, in a group of friends and support system and mentors that have come out of that. And frankly, when I was at the league, it was in many different departments. So I could be learning things simply because that was my network and my system. I would say that there's an interesting point when Eden made the point as well about pay. It's important on our side, and I've had this experience already. I've had it once when I hired before, and I did it incorrectly, where I just asked a very basic question of like, okay, what do we typically pay someone at this level? Now, what ends up happening, or at least I learned that I didn't take a piece of this control that I need to take. And so the second time or the third time I had to do this actually was in my current job. And the first thing I did was, listen, I sat down with the CFO, which he is my boss now. And then I sat down with the HR representative and I said, listen, we talk about the idea that we want to be, equitable in our pay and how we pay our employees. But yet a lot of times when I hear companies in my past say that, we also say things like, and the person has to negotiate for themselves. But the biggest piece of it is that now, knowing that I was hiring someone and taking possession of and ownership of that, I had a big say in that, was to say, okay, please do not let me, with the knowledge that you have, I am not asking you to show me what you pay everyone, but with the knowledge that you have, do not allow me to allow the person that I am hiring to come in at a pay that is less than the range of pay that is allocated for this group. I do not want to know that they are doing work for lesser pay than people that are doing the same job as well. Do not allow me to do that. I want them to feel properly remunerated. I had felt like I was on the other end of that at times, and I know how bad and demotivating as an employee it feels. And I feel it gets worse when you then find out the nuances behind that. As Eden mentioned, sometimes it's race. So, it's a touchy subject, but I feel like it was my one chance to take and be more proactive about it. And I think we have to do that, especially if we want to change that dynamic in the industry.
Yes, definitely. And then just before going to you, there's I don't know if you know Alexis Franklin, but she really wanted to hear from you, so we're gonna ask you a question right away. There is just saying hi to Amaya from India. Some people that they are watching us almost like every week now. So Mame Paulo, she's a fan of the show. Ryan from Pakistan, say hi. Another friend of ours, Tabo, in Botswana, right, Tabo? Saying hi. There's Joseph McGrath was here last week as well, from Philadelphia. So we have people. There's Regina in Brazil. Hello. Let me just. So you must know Solomon.
I think I do.
That's great. No worries. I have family here too.
I paid everybody.
There you go. Someone is saying that I have a nice haircut. Thank you.
Aww.
It's a new one. So where did I stop? There's another friend of ours that is here too. Marcelones in Neuchâtel.
I also paid him too.
You're very popular. Who else? There's so Alexis is in Harlem. There's Erica. I don't know where she is. She was in Korea last time we talked. Oh yeah, we're streaming on LinkedIn as well. So this is the first time that we're streaming on LinkedIn. So Hatim, super informative. So your background mixed with your sports matches helped you in the industry. You wanna quickly address that, both of you?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
At least on my side, I'll tell you even very basic things. I remember when I was at Citi, I used to geek out on looking at the different contracts and how the terms matched up and really what they were trying to reinforce. And that was just more of a geeky thing, but I had a really cool couple of bosses, John and Andrea, and they used to go next level on the dive on the documents. And it turned out that when I got to the NBA, and actually before that, even at MLS, it became a huge asset to be able to spot and know how to navigate contracts, even though I wasn't a lawyer, in order to help support different negotiations they were having from the business side. And I think that did allow, more opportunities for more exposure, and certainly gives you a level of trust that you may not have if you didn't have that background.
Right. Eden?
Yeah, for me, it was actually a door opener, because not being someone that was kind of raised in the sports world, or even that had that much experience in the sports world, it helped me to, I guess, make my resume a little bit more attractive to people in the sports world, especially FIFA being a worldwide recognized name.
Okay.
Definitely.
Now, I have a question that's it will sound silly. Perhaps it is silly. So I'm going to ask you anyway, because you're both Black women, and of course we know that both women and Black people suffer some sort of discrimination. But my question is there a similar type of discrimination? Would say, is there a big difference? For instance, if we take the gender out of the, well, what would you say that's suffers maybe more discrimination, a Black man or a white woman? And not only in corporate America, then we're talking specifically in sport. And forgive me if you think this is a stupid question, but
No, I don't think it's a stupid question. I think, this may be very controversial, but the way I see the ranking in corporate America is first position, white man, then white woman, then Black man, and then Black woman. I think the Black women are, unfortunately, always kind of last in the totem pole. And again, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's because there is this kind of stereotype about us that whenever we try to be assertive or to have a management style that it's, assertive, like I said, that is automatically bucketed into being an angry Black woman. And so I was actually reading a video to prepare for this, and for this, webinar, and it's insane to see how, like, as Black women, we have two full-time jobs. One is to do your job, like your everyday tasks, and the second one is to make sure that you do it in a way that it's not perceived as aggressive, and it's not perceived as, combative, and it's like, you cannot even have any level of passion within your tone of voice or the way you carry yourself, because otherwise that's seen as like problematic. And one thing that I've always said is, and I don't want to change subject, but a lot of people now during the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement, keep on talking about, jobs need to have diversity, and we need to hire more Black people and Black women. But a lot of times, it's not just about the number of people there are in corporate America, but it's also about how, like, what is the position of those Black people and Black women? Like, anybody who's watching this right now, if you have been lucky enough to see a Black woman at the manager or like senior level, please tell me how many Black women you've seen managing white people. Like, you may have a woman in a leadership position, or like somehow like senior, and a lot of times they're not managing white people or non-Blacks. It's almost like, even in my career, they've only given me, Black and brown people to manage. And it's almost like creating like a division within the job, because they're like, well, you're a Black woman, you know how to talk to your own people, right? And so you keep on creating that wedge in between, like the white people and us. So it's like, if you're lucky and you get along, with your team and they're all Black, it's great. If not, you're seen also as someone that doesn't even know how to manage your own people. So it's just it's a very intricate situation, and Black women, for the way I see it and my experience, is very tough. It's very tough.
That's an interesting question that you asked there about, you're asking people, and so now I'm talking to people watching us, if you have, as you said, Black women as managers, and they can post in the comments, and then we can let you know. Let's see what sort of their experience is like. Nikki, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can go ahead and just nod. Like, white men are good. They're great. I think it'll be interesting to watch what happens now as well. Because one of the things I think we see and we hear, at least I see and I hear quite a bit, is that even in this moment, it'll be interesting to watch who gets placed where. When I go and I look at different boards, you can tell that people have been, half solving as different urgencies have come up. So we've had and we continue to have the Me Too movement. And we've had a push for having women on boards and senior executive levels, et cetera. And so then when you start clicking around, you'll look at different boards, different executive levels of companies, and you'll see that they may have inserted women from the last time you checked. And usually they tend to be white women, unless it is the diversity and equity person, or possibly the HR function, in which case you may have a person of color and sometimes a Black woman.
Right.
I think the hierarchy that Eden laid out, that makes sense. I think right now we're still seeing a new level of tension, I think, where when people are now turning to answers and to put people in positions, especially within the sports industry, of seniority and of visibility, they are turning a lot more to Black men, regardless of the very often times where there are many Black women toiling behind the scenes that do not want to be behind the scenes, but are then told by both their Black men counterparts as well as the institution itself that, hey, we'll let you in the room when it's ready.
Right.
So that's a whole other end of this dynamic. And I think that's why, our role tends to be looked at as at the bottom of the hierarchy. I think I've also mentioned some point that I think Black women don't necessarily give ourselves as much credit as we deserve for the multiple areas that we do navigate, and that we do it pretty successfully, frankly. Whether it's that dynamic of race or gender, whether there's multiple different hidden intersections as well, that do present themselves to us, and frankly, we do quite well, and we succeed when we are in those positions.
Cool. I'm going to go to the next one. Just a few more comments. I want to put them all now. It's just that my map always says it's a fantastic interview, so you should know that. By the way, if you're enjoying it, show Nikki and Eden your love. You can hit the like button there. That would be great. Erica just telling us that she's still in Korea, 1:30 a.m., but worth staying up to follow the conversation. Thank you, Erica. Hatim, thank you for your answer to his question. There are more comments and questions here. We're going to get to that in a second. Now, as I mentioned, this is primarily about career, right? Career in sports, and you have already some experience in the sport business, and you mentioned that you have suffered at one time or another some type of discrimination. I would like to be very informative and ask you to maybe share an example or two, and perhaps an episode where you think you reacted appropriately. Yes, I did what I should do when that happens, and then you tell, for people listening, if there are other young Black women watching either now live or later on, that they can follow your example, or also when you felt that you're under pressure and you didn't, looking back, you think you should have, handled it differently? So
for me specifically, to answer your question, I wish it was at times pure discrimination. And I think like using the word discrimination, it's almost dismissive of the experience that Black women and Black people have in corporate America in any type of, environment, professional environment. Because as I mentioned a lot of times, sometimes it would be almost better if someone tells you, you're Black, I don't like you, and I'm not going to promote you and this and that, because at least you know what you're dealing with. The biggest issue, and that's why I'm a huge promoter and preacher of open dialogue, communication, feedback, and all of that, is because what we deal with is almost an invisible enemy, which you can label as a microaggressions, you can label as unconscious bias, and sometimes you can label as simple like ignorance, right? So for me, I've had the like boss of my department or where I used to work making a comment like, oh yeah, all my friends are all fair skin and they have red hair and blonde hair. And I was like, okay, like, and so how am I supposed to take that? To me, there are things that happen, and then you start putting them all together and you're like, okay, so is that the reason why you may ask people that look like that, how was your weekend? And you may not ask me. So like I was saying, because it's not an open, like there is no open communication, and maybe there is not even like the proper tools to give a person feedback as Black people, and because we don't have anyone that makes the environment safe for us to speak and have a open communication, you start also assuming. So the points that I wanted to touch are, there is microaggression. There is also one thing that I want to say, as Black people or Black women, we don't have to be at all times perfect in order to be promoted. We have to be perfect, and we have to be almost an immaculate human in order to then be promoted and be put in positions of growth and such and such. And then you have your other counterparts, your white counterparts, they don't have to be perfect. They can come in to a job on a Monday talking about, oh my God, I'm so hungover, this and that, or like they can, be their full self, and still those, that behavior not being used against them when it's time for a, the performance, review throughout the year, which happens once or twice a year, or when it's time for your bonus, or when it's time to be promoted, or when it's time to give you that project that is going to put you in front of executives or people that may vouch for you to be like, the next star. So in the narrative that I'm seeing a lot during Black Lives Matter is like, anytime, a Black person, something happens to them, it's like, but he was such a good person. And, he was like a volunteer in church every day. You're like, oh my God, she went to Harvard. But like, why do we have to be perfect in order for us to get the minimum, or to get the same things that our, white counterparts get, even of a less of, production on their end? And, on that note also, it's very difficult to be able to also have open communication when if a manager that doesn't know, again, like how to deal with a Black person, doesn't know how to talk to you, or they're afraid of you, and they're not even telling you they're afraid of you, or to have, sensitive conversations with you, because then you as a professional and you're Black, they're letting you stay that, I don't know if you're average, or like if you have room for improvement, they're not growing that for you. Like they're not helping you grow, which is the job of a manager. So there are people that stay in the same position forever, and then they may leave, and they're forced to take lateral, positions instead of continuing to grow, simply so that maybe they can get a little bump in their salary. And it's almost like their dreams of being in a leadership positions, like they're, slower, because you have to continue to move away in order to, show there is growth. And I'm just going to give you give one last example. In one of the companies that I worked in, and I was one of the 2 or 3 Black women in a company and in the department of over 150 people. And I saw the only Black guy that was a coordinator in his level, and he was the only Black person. So it was a Black man who was the only Black person in that role. And he was there for over 2 years as a coordinator. And I saw that all the people that started at his level that were white, they were already managers, or like they were already promoted. So I had a good rapport with his bosses, who happened to be white men. And I sat with them and I was like, why is this guy not being promoted? Like, obviously there is something that is not in his performance that is not allowing him to grow, but what is it? And they wouldn't tell me. So I said, if you guys have problems with giving him feedback, give it to him, or I can help you broker that. And mind you, that's not my job, right? Like that's not my job. That's not my responsibility. But as a Black woman, or already frustrated in my role, I'm like, why do we keep on doing that? Why do we keep on leaving people just like in their position? We are good enough to do the job, right? Whatever responsibility they give us, we're obviously good enough, but we're not good enough to be promoted and to grow and to manage and to become like, the future of the company. So why keep us? Like, and to me, that's always been my frustration. Like, why keep someone to leave them do like the minimum of their capability, And in the reverse side, I know that there are white people that when they see, other white people, they may mentor them, they may grow them because, they may see themselves in them. And I know it's tough to see as a white person yourself in a Black person or whatever, but that's not fair. Then don't hire us if you can do the same.
It is. Sometimes it's not easy, as you said, evident. And I think this is one of the reasons of this conversation, because I think, sometimes, as you said, we're maybe oblivious for whatever reason it is. Maybe it's a lack of interest, but sometimes we don't realize. So this type of conversation and listening to that type of thing, this is why I'm not talking much at all. I just really want to listen much more, is so we understand this type of situation. Very quickly, just going back to what you said. So you went and you took action and you went to talk to the person's manager about that. Did that result in anything? I mean, either for him or against you, or was
no, not against me. Somehow my openness in talking has always been seen as like, oh, Eden is Italian, like, it's kind of like, I guess, like cute and funny in a way, but the person still hasn't been promoted and has just made a lateral move. And mind you, this person has never asked me to help him. Never. Yeah. If anyone is watching this panel, he never asked me to help. But I thought it was my role, right? Like as a Black person. And in possibly I did it because I hoped also that another Black person, would do the same for me one day. But there was only like, there is not people in leadership positions that, can do that. And most of the time, and this is no offense to anyone, in my experience, the Black people that I've seen that have, positions of leadership is because they don't rock the cradle, And just to give you one last example, I have a friend of mine who's a Black Muslim. And she works for one of the Fortune 500 companies, and it's not in sports. She works in the food industry. And during the coronavirus pandemic, they have been doing a Zoom call like every week with the team as kind of team bonding. So it was Memorial Weekend, which is a long weekend here. And the whole weekend, like that, the Tuesday after the long weekend, they had this Zoom call. And everybody was going around saying, what did you do this weekend? And she was obviously the only Black person and the only woman and the only Muslim. The only Black woman. So everybody was going around saying, oh, we had a barbecue, we did this, we did that. And there was a back and forth, right? There was like, oh, what did you eat? And people were basically like exchanging, asking questions, exchanging information. So she said that the whole weekend, she was like, I want to be able to show up as my full self. So the whole weekend she was dwelling about saying, I'm Muslim. This weekend was the end of Ramadan, which we celebrate with the Eid dinner. So Eid meal. So she basically said, imagine just for a Zoom call that has technically nothing to do with the specific job, she was preparing. So that's also like an emotional, drainage that comes with being a Black person and, of a different religion. So she basically decided to say it, and that's like extending an olive branch to your team and bring them into your world, because maybe you think they're afraid to ask. So if I open up about it, they're going to be able to ask me. So she says, this weekend, it was the end of Ramadan, and we had a dinner. Not one person acknowledged her comment. Everybody was like, oh, nice. Moved on to the next subject. So imagine this person, it took her days and hours of preparation, and everybody like maybe it wasn't to be mean, it wasn't to be dismissive, but there is whatever unconscious bias, whatever fear of offending people. If someone is already opening up to you, like what other excuse can you use? Like if this person is not afraid to speak, why are you afraid to simply say, oh, what did you eat? Oh, right. How long was Ramadan? Like, it's just exhausting, because you go from, oh, you know what, I'm going to assimilate with them, I'm going to look like them, I'm going to act like them. That doesn't work. Then you start asking questions. That doesn't work, because nobody gives you the straight answer. Then you start being full yourself, and then they're like, whoa, okay, that's a little too much, let's stop it. So it's like, no matter what you try, it's just exhausting. Like and my dream one day is for white people to let us know what is it that we need to do in order for, maybe things to be more equal for us in the workplace.
Right. Well, I don't not have the answer for that, but I'm interested in learning more and more about it. Nikki, what about you? Is there one example that you would show someone or mention to someone about it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Eden gave a really good example of when you're seeking to be brave. So you're seeking to go advocate on behalf of a colleague. A lot of times, though, the opportunities are just dropped upon you. So, and not necessarily the opportunity in a great light, but the scenario will be dropped on you. So I've had, I'll give an example of reviewing a business pipeline and being in a pipeline meeting, me, Black woman, two folks junior to me, one white male, one Indian male, and then three folks more senior to me, the head of our team, white male, another white male from the business line team, and a Latinx male. And going through pipeline by regions, you would talk about, your business performance, what you see on the horizon, what deals you think may close, etc., and whether you think you'll hit different targets. And so one of the other people that needed to speak for a region shared their message, and same cadence, same tone. And I shared the exact same message and used, and I actually think I purposely tried to leverage their cadence, their tone. And the head of the team turned and said, and looked around at his group of boys, his group of, in my case, in my view, of course, looking at his group of non-Black boys, also saying, well, why is she getting sassy with me? Now, if you are a Black woman, you know that is like, that's like the go-to, especially because it was very interesting to watch, though, because this is the level. This is a comfort that you might have at a senior level that you say this. I remember that room, there were two chuckles from the boys that were, or the men that were more junior to me, right? But the two men that were at my level of responsibility in that meeting, they got quiet quick. Like, it was, wait a minute, let me not even chuckle, let me not even acknowledge that, I'm okay with this. And I remember the choices going through my head. And you have to remember, for me, this might have been year 4. So please definitely think about this in the context of timeline and experiences. Yeah. I've been through this a couple of times before. And I remember saying something like, you want to try that again? Like, would you like to explain what you mean that might be so sassily offensive to you about what I just said? And I said it. And this is not something that I would have done earlier in my career. Earlier in my career, I had another incident where performance was not meeting up with what I thought should be both remuneration and promotion. And this is where it usually clicks for most of us who don't really pay too much attention in the beginning. Once you start, at first you're like, maybe it's race. You're like, nah, maybe not. Maybe I'll just not think it's race. Maybe it's not gender. Maybe there's something else. And eventually you start having performance reviews where everything exceeds, but you're still not getting promoted. So now it starts creeping in. What is this thing that I am not seeing? Yeah. And I remember in the discussion itself about promotion, my boss referred back to our meeting discussing performance. And he said that, well, when you presented and you asked for your promotion, you smiled. So you couldn't have been serious, right? And for me, I was like, I think I said something to the extent of, you cannot be serious, because it goes back to the previous points. As a Black woman, a lot of times you're expected to be on your ascribed personalities on two ends. You're either going to be the angry Black woman, or you're going to be the super cheery, Bojangles and, having a great time all the time woman. And there's no nuance to what ranges of emotions, what levels of seriousness others might ascribe to you. So I think that it's hard for you to control then what other people are going to do. And so a lot of times my main goal is, you need to just, at least for me, I can't ascribe this or prescribe this to anyone else. Just lean into the person that you are, and do not have people puppeting you on a string to be somebody that you're not. Because after that first interaction around promotions, where my boss told me that because I smiled, he didn't take me seriously, the entire next year, I stepped out of being myself and did not smile in any interaction with that boss. So it's a young thing to do. It might be the wrong thing to do, but you're working on feedback, right? And so for me, that end of it is always make sure that you're answering to the one boss that you have every day, which is the one in the mirror. Do not become somebody else because someone told you to lean away from some of your strongest traits, from your friendliness, from your assertiveness. Do not let that change your path of how you want to develop into the professional you want to see when you look in that mirror. So that's my bad example. I really love I'm proud of my other example. Yeah, sometimes just speak up because they're not ready for it. They don't expect it. And you will look at yourself with a higher level of respect, and hold your chin higher and walk taller, and probably, frankly, perform with that same level of carry-on energy and adrenaline of assertiveness that you just had in the moment.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I mean, the whole explanation, what you said, the attitude, then it just got me sort of questioning, because you had this attitude of responding, as you said, you were a few years now on the job. And then you said that something happened way before, then you didn't. Now, do we mean that the first time when you didn't respond was a wrong attitude, or maybe it was the right attitude for the time?
No.
Because
no.
You could get hurt. And
I would say for this kind of conversation especially, there's a real joy in being able to learn from what other people did before. There's no need to try some of this stuff again. Like, really.
It would be something that could have hurt you at that time, but
I don't think so. I mean, I think what hurts more is being someone you're not, right? Because you're performing. Think about it. Your performance reviews are saying you're awesome and you are this person. You're yourself. Your performance reviews are saying you are excellent. All of a sudden, you then take yourself out of this equation to answer to one point in that review. The point that says, well, you smiled when you asked for something of merit, and thus I didn't give you something. Well, that you need to be able to identify has nothing to do with you. That is clearly something to do with the other person, maybe the pressures they're under, maybe their inability to be creative about how they're going to tell you you're not about to get this promotion, or the bump in salary. It could be anything, but it's definitely not you. That is one of those points where, for me, it's wrong that I then decided with you, because I'm not only going to be in a scenario with just me and my boss all day. It's going to be me, Eden, and my boss, for example. So what am I about to do in this conversation? Eden, cheer, 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 boss, no. Like, it becomes a very strange cycle for you as a person to now not be yourself because of one comment. I think the real answer is, and maybe we need to start to say it to you now so you get to do it earlier in your career, is you say, what does it mean to you that I smiled when I asked? Please go into more depth. And if it is that, you want to come off that comment, give them the room to do it. Give them the room to come off the comment and truly explain to you why, based on the merits that you have pointed out, you did not get the promotion that you asked for. And it could be entirely wrong. But the best part of it is you'll have the information. And I also say that if you feel like there's a big win in knowing that someone has made you so upset that you're about to leave. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be the next day. You just know that this might not be the environment or the leader that you need to be under. So you know you need to change. Now the rest of the road for you is just a time of finding, picking, seeking opportunities, because you're not committed to being and continuing to stay under this direction of leadership. And frankly, you're taking notes for yourself for the leader that you either want to be or that you do not want to be. Both notes are equally important. So you might as well explore it in that uncomfortable moment. You might want to step away, but you must come back, because I don't think you want to lose yourself, who you are, your self-esteem, or your sanity in the process. Those things are tantamount to anything else.
Cool. I totally agree. Yes. Let me ask you, how are you sort of with time? Because we just passed a 1 hour mark, and normally we close here. There's still sort of loads of comments here. I was just going to jump straight to those, but I do have one. Maybe I'm going to leave one last one that could be a more sort of controversial question, but it really touches the points of the fight against racism and the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think it's important for you to share sort of your point of view. So actually, a good friend of mine, don't know if you know him, probably won't say his name, although I should, because he posted this publicly. So Andres Cardenas, also from the FIFA Masters, one of his posts on Instagram said something about that. There's some people that say it's horrible when an innocent Black person is killed by the police, but destroying property has to stop. And then it says, but try just changing the phrase, say it's horrible property being destroyed, but killing innocent Black men has to stop. Just when you change that, I think we both agree, or all of us agree, that looting and damaging and all this kind of things would probably, people shouldn't condone violence. But, if you change the perspective, you change the order of the phrase, then I think you see, where you should focus that matter. And he says, if you change that, then if you don't, you're prioritizing the wrong part. Don't know if it got clear. I should have actually posted the phrase there. I'm going to read it again. So you keep saying it's horrible that innocent Black man was killed, but destroying property has to stop. He says, try saying it's horrible that property is being destroyed, but killing innocent men has to stop. And I think that's the focus should be. Now, the point that I was now just gave this example to get to a point is a lot of the criticism to the protests has to do with violence. And how do you see that? Do you think when you see those protests, do you think, oh, that actually does the movements a disservice, or that's something that you actually should be prepared to expect?
Because this webinar is about Black women in corporate America, I'm gonna try to attach your question to what this webinar is about. So, right at the beginning of the protest, against George Floyd, basically public lynching by a white cop, I watched the ESPN film 30 for 30 about Bruce Lee. So in the documentary, they show how also Bruce Lee was really, kind of partially involved with the Black people that then also were part of the riots, in the protest also against police brutality and for Black equality back then. So if you do the math, that's almost 60 years ago, or about 60 years ago. And to me, watching that documentary, which is fantastic and I highly recommend it, it was like, it made me physically sick to see that this has been the same conversation that we're having for the past 6 years. There are fathers that, probably their fathers had to go through this, and then now their sons or children are going through that. So for me, when you speak about violence, I like what I hope, Nikki, you're going to repeat what you said before, because I love your point. On my end, I really think that I don't condone violence, but I think it's very sad when people put more value into materialistic things, in things that can be replaced, versus a human body. Yeah. I wish people, and I've said it many times, if that was a white person dying under the hands of a cop or a person, there would be more than riots. There would be a world uprise, but then kind of to, go back to something else, I think the reason why we're still at this point, decades later, and, things are not changing, is because a lot of times people say, I'm not like them. I'm not like the racist. I'm not like the bad person that hates Black people. Actually, I like Black people. I have Black friends and I'm a good person. And these people, I think, that have always found themselves in position of power, but didn't do anything about it, because they're like, I'm not a bad person. I hire Black people, but they're not open to the communication. And I think that's why words like white fragility and white privilege are, like real, sayings that need to be really, really looked into deeply, for people to kind of really understand like what their role is. And I think right now there is a lot of, discomfort, and people are too afraid to go through this discomfort to then make change. So when you don't want to deal with the discomfort, you're going to call out things that make you comfortable, like justifying, that you don't want to be part of this because I don't want to be part of looting. I don't want to be part of the crime, or like, this is not how you do it. And just like I was saying about corporate America. So then how do you do it? Like, tell us, like, how would you do it? What would you do if you were in our shoes? And, personally, I don't wish anybody to go through what Black people go through, but, tell me what's your solution?
And also we have to remember as well that whenever there's a Pacific protests, then they are criticized as well. So you get a guy like Kaepernick, who is banned from the NFL for kneeling. Mm-hmm. So how can someone protest? But Nikki, what's your take on it?
Well, I mean, you hit on one point. I mean, I generally have a upchuck to approved protest. I don't understand what your sign off on my protest means. It just doesn't seem logical to me, but if you'd like to stamp approval on things, have at it. My point around, I guess, your question, I don't ascribe the violence to Black Lives Matter or the movement. However, I mean, I'll look at it entirely differently. I just feel that there's a system issue here. I think, I put this back as well to think of these things in the context of your responsibilities as a professional in an organization, etc. But let's take it outside this vein, but everything informed each other. A crime was committed on a video that everyone in the world could see. Any other crime, for probable cause, you can arrest someone. Instead, what the authorities in the justice system decide to do is take the T0 moment of the crime happening and not arrest someone. And the more and more each and every arrogant and unaware day of understanding that your timeline was no longer the one you thought it was. This is called like the worst reading of the room and reading of the moment, I think, in history. The level of upset, the level of agreed upon anger, the level of urgency that was demanded for a response to that was not one that the authorities decided that they wanted to do. And I always say, if you do not step in at the point where you have a chance to guide and to take the right steps in order for a process to begin, and once you leave justice in the hands of the discretion of anyone else, then the people in this case will take the justice that they seek, and they will do it in the way that the people see fit. It's not even a hard thing. This is, we've anybody that's taken a psych class, anybody that's been in any conversation, anybody that's been in a management conversation, they tell you if there's an issue, you address it immediately so that the connection and the response is tied to the issue. So now when you've waited a few days, right, and all of a sudden now, I don't even know if this is your actual plan timeline, but all of a sudden something ends up becoming more violent or burned. All of a sudden now you act. All you've reinforced is, wait a minute, well, you won't listen to me when I'm protesting in this way. But if I protest in this way, all of a sudden people are listening. And this isn't new. This is history. This is when people have tried peaceful protest in the past, unaccompanied by other options, it feels as though the movements don't actually make the progress that they need to have. So I have a very hard time, saying that the violence in and of itself is the problem. That is not the problem. There are so many other routes that could have been taken by true leaders and leaders that were assessing the moment properly for people to believe in the system. You've had, even if we look back at 10 years, you've consistently shown that the justice system is not responding in the way that we would ask it to respond. We would all ideally want it to respond. Hey, there's been a crime. You are going to indict someone for that crime. You will have a trial for the crime. You will arrest them expeditiously. You will have this trial. The jury of the peers will decide. And what we see is, in fact, the result we get. But once you started down the same road as the last, 20 times, and you didn't respond to the actual crisis of the moment, which once again, as I'm telling you, this is going to apply in business as well. If you let it get out of your rightful sphere to make the correct decisions, to make the swift decisions, you leave it to the power of someone else to decide. And it was decided for you. Yeah,
I agree 100%. I just noticed that whenever I said the Pacific protests, of course I meant peaceful, but Pacific. It's just too many languages fighting in my head. But you're spot on again, Nikki. By the way, there's, so many. We never got that many applause here, or Joseph said just applause, and he says inspirational. Alexandre Diaz, great women and outstanding professionals. Really great to listen to you. Marsha on LinkedIn, powerful and very relatable points shared by ladies. Thank you both for sharing. Yeah, it's been great. Amaya says it's a superb interview. Now, let me just go. I probably won't be able to ask all questions now. I'm going to acknowledge them, though. Angela, she just made a comment here, also saying that there's all other types of discrimination now, and now against remote workers. So she's against that. From your experience, what sports organizations? Shall we try to? I'm going to combine these two. So, Didac Asensio, from your experience, what sports organizations must do in order to end discrimination? I know that that could be an answer for a whole webinar, right? It's a question, for a whole webinar. When he says, are they doing enough? I think we can say no is a short answer. But you might want to, don't know if you have one or two ideas that you want to share or elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I think it goes along with a little bit with what Nikki was saying about the system being broken, and that's why we need to protest in order to make our voices heard and then for real change to come. So I think one thing that has been really disappointing for me to see and like frustrating is all these performative actions that a lot of these organizations and corporations are taking. So it starts with the statement, whether it's strong or not or mild, and then it goes to specifically to sports organization, for example, with teams being able to wear jerseys that say Black Lives Matter or kneeling. Now kneeling is no longer, the big
no longer protest.
Yeah, it's no longer like, the problematic, action. And so all these things, they feel so performative. And I kind of gave you this example yesterday to you guys where I feel like it's like going to a restaurant, and I go to a restaurant, I say, I'm hungry. Can you please give me the menu? And then they don't give me the menu and they're like, oh my God, you look so pretty. I like your hair. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. Can I have your menu so that I can order something to eat because I'm hungry? And then instead of giving me the menu, I'm like, they're like, oh my God. And they come hug me. And I'm like, oh, I appreciate the hug. Can I please have the menu? And then this goes on and on and on. And then after I start complaining, they give me the menu. And mind you, all I got is the menu so far. And then I order and nobody comes to give my order. And they keep on complimenting me. They may give me the best seat at the restaurant. And I'm like, I'm getting even more hungry now. I don't care where I'm sitting. I just really need to eat. So the way it feels, right, about the protest as well as in corporate America or in these teams, it feels like they're giving us all the things like as a caress, like, it's okay, calm down. And that's not what we need. Like, nobody needs like a pat in the back or like favors or like, I don't know, like an extra performance of niceness and kindness. I personally don't care for that. And I think that a lot of Black people feel that way. We just want to be treated equally. Treated equally means hire us, and not just like the token one Black person or Black woman and Black, man. Because as you can see in this webinar, me and Nikki have different tones of darkness. We have different ideas. We've had different experiences. So if we went to a job, both of us, and we can be counterparts, we could do our job well, but also bring different perspectives because we have different backgrounds or different stories, different ideas. Yeah. Just like there is different white people working on the same things and working in the same place. Yeah. And then once you hire us, we need, like, my question is, when I hear the MBA, I hear them like MBA and WNBA. I don't know the details of it, but at least from the outside as a spectator, I feel like I can hear their opinions and, their voices also coming together as united. What worries me about soccer, like, I don't see that. I really feel like I haven't really heard that many Black or minority soccer players speak. And from the little bit of experience that I have, I know they're also fearful for the owners of the teams to come forward and, maybe make them not, blackball them, kind of like it happened with, Colin Kaepernick. And so for me, the soccer world and FIFA, it's I just wonder what goes on there, because I haven't heard one, owner of the teams coming up and speaking up. And if you have, please share with me. Barely some teams have come forward, or coaches. So again, the people in charge who are white men or like, white people, I haven't heard anything strong coming up from them so that the Black players can feel, empowered and valued, and
There has been some statements that I can share, but the question is that enough? Probably. Well, I mean, is that the answer? So, Nikki, answering sort of the same question, do you have sort of an idea to share of how sports bodies should address that matter?
Yeah, sure. So I'll preface this by saying I'm not a diversity, equity, inclusion expert. I am on the recipient, and I think that I'm a recipient in that I'm an employee, and I have been an employee at a lot of these companies, and thus I believe my opinion is valid. But I would say there's a couple steps that sports organizations can take. So I think sports has always gotten the fairy dust as being, this land of great equality and the one place where, your achievements can shine and such and such and the other. And fine, maybe in the sport itself, that could be the case. But I don't think the organizations are exempt from what's happening in other organizations and other steps that need to be taken. So I would say the first thing is you need to know where your company stands. And that a lot of times is done by a racial equity audit, right? So you can get an external consultant to come do this from an unbiased way. You can solicit the feedback, obviously, of your employees, but really and truly, I think there's something to looking into every single asset as it's built within your company. And that doesn't only mean the personnel. It could actually be well written into your employee code of conduct. It could be written into the way that you conduct deals. It could be written into the way that you provide incentives for performance. It could be into the culture of what you see as a talented person versus not. So that's why I think it's important to have an unbiased eye come and just take a look at the organization itself, learn about its goals and its functions, and go forward from there. I think one of the most powerful things, though, that I have found sitting in my chair right now is when the head of your company, they make the external statement, right? But that's one piece of it. What are you saying to me as I sit inside of this company? Are you saying, I am very serious about what I just said, and I expect everyone in this organization to be pulling the boat towards us becoming more racially equitable? Once that comes from the top, it becomes very clear to everyone, including all of the hierarchy, that if for any reason you are not in line with my mission of where I would like to take my company, then you will personally have to deal with the displeasure of me not meeting the goals of my company as a head of an organization. Once that is done, you then outline, look, we understand that we don't know much about this. So we're going to have to learn, but we are committed to the lifelong commitment of learning, acting, and improving. And once all that is said, I think, first of all, the weight comes off that we're not trying to rush this into a period of time. We're not saying, oh, okay, well, while this topic is hot, we're going to address it. We're saying, look, we've recognized this. This has brought it to our eyes. This has brought it to our attention, and we're committed to solving it. And that shouldn't be new to anyone. When we can look at as recently as COVID. When COVID hit, everyone moved. They started figuring out how they were going to act, how they're going to change their logistics, their business in order to, one, maybe survive, but then in some cases be opportunistic. Secondly, we've seen it before when gambling opened up and all of a sudden there's a whole new industry. So the idea that senior leadership or anyone in a company believes that throwing up your hands in fear and saying, I don't know what to do, especially in the era of Google, is not necessarily where we need to be. You say to yourself, what have I done in previous scenarios when I have been faced with something I'm not knowledgeable about? I understand now that this is not only, business, this is human. So how do I soften it up a bit? How do I say to people, my intentions are in fact positive and I'm looking to make a real difference and a change. Please bear with me, much like everything we do not know, and that we start building the plane as it goes, i.e. learning and acting as I'm going to make some mistakes, and I am open to the feedback, and we as a company are going to grow together. We've done it before. We've been opportunistic before. We've thrived as an industry before. We've shined and glowed and made tons of money and lots of success doing it. So it can't be that only for items that are comfortable to us, we will go and pursue. This one might be more uncomfortable and it might be our biggest challenge yet, but perhaps it can end up being the biggest win yet as well. So, I mean, I think that organizations know when they're not doing enough, and they should already know because they have an outline that they're committed to this for the long term, even as they're figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, this is excellent. It's not only me saying that. There's so many people saying this. This talk is great, inspirational. Actually, Erica here is also telling people, do not forget to share the love, give a like. Joseph, who's been very active today, says we have so much more to learn as society. I keep saying we all come into the world with our own skills and traits. We should be sharing and teaching each other. This is exactly right. This is, I mean, what we're trying to do here. There are many comments. I'm going to go to one more. I don't know if she's still up, because that was, she mentioned to us, almost 2 a.m. there for her. But Erica Pupo asked you if you encountered strong differences or similarities in the types of discrimination and prejudice you faced living and working in different countries. Before we go, can you
Yeah, absolutely.
About your experience abroad then?
I would need a whole week to talk about Italy.
So I'm going to guess that it is very different.
It's different and the same.
Okay.
I think discrimination is everywhere, unfortunately, and that's why you see the Black Lives Matter movement, kind of having taken, different aspects of it all over the world, because the frustration the Black people are feeling, it's international. Unfortunately, it's global. And so, yes, I can only speak of the countries where I lived in. So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's everywhere, because.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make sure, because I know the question came from Korea and it must be quite late. So I want to make sure that, and then we give them, we give her what she's asking for.
You take this one.
Yeah, definitely. It's been different and the same. And I think it depends a lot on the setup of the environment. There are many places that are very, they like to oppress and actually to suppress the idea that there is discrimination. And that can make it even more difficult, because instead of tackling the problem, they tackle the idea that you are feeling this problem. Mm-hmm. So, maybe let's call it, let's say a Switzerland, Brazil has this, at least in my experience, once again, my experience.
My Italian friends love to say that Italy is not as racist as America.
France is another one where there's been such a branding of internationalization, and we love everyone. And by the way, I'm from Trinidad. Could be the same. I'm just not going to dive into that now, because that could be a whole nother thing. But it's this idea that we don't talk about it, so we must not have this problem. And if you bring it up, then you're the naysayer and you're the problem, right? And it's that level of denial. It's the, oh no, we're not racist, we're classist. Like, those kind of things have come up in conversations. And then in the same conversation, I might be at a table in Brazil with a series of well-to-do people and have them say something along the lines of, hi, this is Neikelle. Oh, she's from Trinidad. She's not American, right? It's almost like you now need to qualify which Black person I am. But either way, I needed something else because I was Black at this table. We further on have the conversation. We say, oh, you say, well, we have rich Black people too. And I'm like, okay, great. Name me one that's not an athlete or an entertainer. And the place goes silent. And so I'm like, I'm not trying to challenge you based on that. I'm just trying to say, maybe it really isn't classism only. It doesn't mean that you don't have classism. It just probably means there's different types of, ways that race shows up. And then finally, from a personal professional experience, it's the surprise and the shock when people see you walking in the room to do something on the commercial side of a sport as opposed to the athletic side of a sport, or the fun sides of the sport, the brand, the like lifestyle, that once you walk in and you're here and you have a contract, you're about to go through the terms, and you're really getting into business. For them, it's a little bit of a shock when they see, but it has been a shock in the past when they have seen me walk in. And that's why I'm glad for the experiences I've had, because then think about it. I'm protected by the brand, right? If I'm the NBA in whatever, in Argentina, Dominican Republic, Uruguay, whatever, and frankly, I've made some of my best professional friends in these spaces, but I actually quite enjoy the initial shock, because shock is a great part of negotiation. That whole idea that they weren't ready for it, so now everybody's back on their toes or back on their heels. They're not sure what to do. But it's those kind of things that do show up. We could probably have a whole discussion, and I think we do all the time, trying to say, if you are in another country, stop pointing over the protesters that are outside your window, point at us and be like, oh my God, but what's going on in America is so horrible. Nope, it's you too. Like, if you have protesters out your windows, I suggest you walk outside and ask them what's up.
Yeah, and to just take a small piece of what Neikelle was saying, I know we're talking about global racism and discrimination, but that's another point. There's a lot of places in corporate America where they're willing to hire you in roles that are high profile and maybe not really like decision making or executive facing, and in any place of revenue, I would say. And I think that's also a big problem, because it almost says you may be able to become like a leader in a role of that is not going to make or break the company. But in a place of sales or sponsorship or finance, it's very rare to see people like Black people at all level, from junior to senior.
Right. Listen, this has been excellent, I think. I mean, we could stay longer, but we just passed 1 hour and 30 minutes, so 90 minutes. This has been the longest, and as I said, certainly the most important live that we did here at iWorkinSport. You two have been brilliant, so clear, and it's been a pleasure. And there has been more questions and more comments. Eden has many friends, I suppose.
I think
and Hatim Morsi at LinkedIn is asking another question, but sorry, we won't have time. There was a Julia Bellastrindadi as well. So thank you for the questions and for the comments from anyone. Don't go anywhere. So someone says thank you as well. Our friend Tabo liked it too. There was many comments coming in today. Don't go anywhere. I'm just gonna tell people where they can see more of iWorkinSport. So just bear with us a second. Again, before we go, thank you so much for being here. The reason we did this live today is to talk about the subject, and if I can, share maybe one advice is that do it. Talk to your friends from all races, all creeds and all religions, and we have to stop that. We have to end that. We need to respect each other, and we see sports as a great catalyst of it. It could be so helpful in that fight, but it's not a given one, right? So you need to take action. This is where you can find us, more about iWorkinSport and all social media channels at iWorkinSport. If you want to follow also, that's in audio. It will be in our podcasts as well at Apple, Spotify, and Google. Again, lastly, if you can hit the like, show your appreciation for Eden and Nikki. This was fantastic. Let me bring them back in. Thank you so much. I think we could schedule another one later on. We won't have, after 12 weeks in a row, or we won't have the live next week. We're taking a break, but we'll be back in a few weeks. But Eden, Nikki, any sort of last words? If you want to leave one key message to people watching before we go?
Just be okay with being uncomfortable. As Nikki said, I think that being uncomfortable can and will bring us all to greatness, whether it's corporate America or just humanity itself. So, and especially if you have people like us that are willing to talk and be open without judgment. Don't hide yourself in your fears or your own ideas or convictions. Just be open to dialogue.
Yeah, and then I would say just be ready to, insert yourself and these themes into your conversations, especially because now your businesses are probably frantically reaching to try and figure out how and who and what can offer up ideas to support them through this moment. I would say definitely find the ways that make you more courageous. If that means, you write down the 2 questions that you're going to ask in every business meeting and you take that deep breath and you ask them because they address equity or race or something that's very important to you, but that could be uncomfortable, feel free to do it. And then also, if you need to give yourself a disclaimer in order to allow yourself to be honest, hey, I'm here, I'm just trying to be productive. I know I'm learning and doing. I know I might make some mistakes. Feel free to add in what you need to do to soften the environment that you might be entering into, and just to allow yourself the moment and the space to step into it with a lot of the needed courage that you might need to have for whatever fear, you might have inside you as you pursue these things. So just go for it, though. No one will shut you up right now.
Cool. That's great. Just to let everybody know as well, if you're watching on YouTube later, there is Eden shared with us a few anti-racism resources, a few super interesting links. They are in the description. Check them out. And I think so many of us have not been racist for many years, and kind of we're happy with it. And perhaps it's time to be anti-racist now. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joelle. This is big. Thank you for this. This is you're committed to critical thinking, and we appreciate it for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for participating. Let me end this now. Oops, sorry. There we go. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye.